Hollywood has always sold a fantasy. Perfect romances, flawless smiles, and private lives scrubbed clean by studio publicity machines. But behind the red carpets, one whispered rumor could end a career overnight. From the 1910s through the 1970s, morality clauses gave studios the power to punish any hint of scandal, and gossip columnists turned private secrets into public ammunition. Many stars survived by building spotless public images while hiding their real lives in shadow. Arranged dates, planted stories, marriages of convenience, and friendships quietly recast as nothing more than publicity. Some were trapped by tabloid exposes or police stings. Others guarded their truth so fiercely that even death could not fully unlock it. What follows is a look at 12 performers whose off-screen realities were far more complicated than their movie posters ever suggested. We will separate documented fact from rumor, move through each story quickly, and reveal how secrecy, pressure, and survival shaped an entire industry. And the first name on this list is one of the biggest heartthrobs Hollywood ever produced, a man whose final secret would shock the world. He was the kind of leading man Hollywood dreams about, tall, impossibly handsome, effortless in romantic scenes opposite the most glamorous actresses of his era. Rock Hudson sold the fantasy of the perfect man, the picture of stability and desirability. But off-screen, Hudson lived in constant fear that a single careless moment would shatter everything he had built. The stakes were extreme. In an industry that enforced strict moral codes, exposure meant unemployment and public humiliation. To protect himself, he even entered a marriage of convenience, a short-lived arrangement designed to quiet suspicion and keep the gossip columns at bay. Behind closed doors, however, Hudson's real relationships were with men. He navigated this double life for years, always aware that the machinery of Hollywood could turn on him without warning. Public appearances were staged, interviews were managed, and the distance between the star and the man grew wider. Then came 1984, the year everything changed. Hudson's AIDS diagnosis forced his private truth into the public eye in a way no publicist could spin. The carefully crafted image of the perfect leading man cracked under the weight of a disease the world did not yet understand. His illness did not simply end a career, it exposed the punishing cost of living in secret. Hudson became one of the most visible faces of an epidemic that many had tried to ignore, and his name became permanently linked to the silence that had once protected him. The public was left to reconcile the fantasy with a reality that had been hidden for decades. The revelation did not come on his own terms. It arrived through illness, speculation, and the slow collapse of a public persona that had been constructed over decades. Fans who had once adored him now saw a more complicated figure, one whose private life was no longer a rumor, but a headline. Montgomery Clift brought a raw, almost unbearable intensity to films like A Place in the Sun and From Here to Eternity. He was not the polished leading man of the old studio system. He was vulnerable, sensitive, and capable of making audiences feel the weight of every unspoken emotion. Off-screen, that sensitivity became a burden. Clift struggled with his sexuality at a time when such feelings could not be openly discussed. He had relationships with both men and women, but none of them brought him lasting peace. The inner turmoil followed him from set to set, shaping his work even as it slowly consumed him. In 1956, a devastating car accident changed everything. The crash left him physically and emotionally scarred, and the pain led to years of addiction. He continued to act, but those who knew him could see the damage. Close friends, including Elizabeth Taylor, stood by him through the darkest periods, offering loyalty when the industry did not. Their bond became one of Hollywood's most famous friendships, but it could not shield him from the suffering he carried. Clift died in 1966 at just 45 years old. His death marked the end of a remarkable, troubled career, and it left behind a body of work that still feels startlingly emotional today. The tragedy of Montgomery Clift is not simply that he died young. It is that he spent much of his life trying to contain a truth the world was not ready to accept. What he gave to audiences was real, but what it cost him in private was almost unbearable. Millions knew him as Perry Mason, the brilliant television lawyer who always uncovered the truth. But Raymond Burr's own backstory was built on an extraordinary lie. For years, he told interviewers about a wife and child who had supposedly died, a heartbreaking personal tragedy that made him seem more sympathetic, and perhaps more importantly, less available. Biographers later confirmed that these stories were entirely fabricated. The real story was quieter and far more meaningful. Burr shared his life with actor Robert Benavides for more than 3 decades. The two men built a private world together, including business ventures that kept them closely connected far from the Hollywood spotlight. Burr never publicly acknowledged his sexuality, and the full shape of his personal life only became widely recognized after his death in 1993. For those who had worked with him, the revelation added a layer of poignancy to a career defined by dignity and restraint. What makes Burr's story so striking is the sheer length of the deception. He did not just dodge a few rumors, he constructed an entire fictional biography and repeated it for years. That level of concealment shows how dangerous the industry could be, even for someone as successful as he was. The public loved Perry Mason, but they never knew the real man behind the courtroom drama. The actor who solved every case on screen spent his life keeping his own biggest case unsolved. He was the most flamboyant entertainer on television, dripping in sequins, furs, and diamonds, with a candelabra blazing on his piano. But the greatest illusion Liberace ever created was not his music. It was the careful wall of denial he built around his private life. In interview after interview, he described the kind of woman he might one day marry, deflecting questions with a smile and a shrug. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, his romantic life moved in a very different direction. His most consequential relationship was with Scott Thorson, a younger man who later filed a sensational palimony lawsuit against him. The case dragged private details into open court and generated headlines that no publicist could control. Still, Liberace refused to publicly acknowledge what insiders already knew. He maintained the fiction through every scandal, every rumor, and every whispered accusation. That glittering public image survived until the end. In 1987, Liberace died from complications related to AIDS, though initial reports often concealed the true nature of his illness. Even in death, the machinery of image management lingered, leaving fans to wonder how much of his life had been genuine and how much had been performance. The pianist's dazzling smile became as legendary as his music, but the mystery behind it exposed the brutal arithmetic of fame: deny, distract, and never let the audience see the full picture. Liberace gave the world spectacle, but the biggest show was the one he performed off stage. Rudolph Valentino was the silent screen's great Latin lover, a man whose smoldering looks made him an international sensation. But his private life was a source of endless rumor. His first marriage collapsed immediately, and his second, to Natasha Rambova, was short-lived, fueling gossip that something was not as it seemed. Close friendships with men, including a French actor named Jean Aurel, only deepened the speculation. Later, documents hinted at possible same-sex encounters, though biographers disagreed sharply about what they proved. Valentino denied the claims, but his graceful mannerisms kept the whispers alive. In an era when masculinity was performed with rigid precision, his elegance and emotional expressiveness made him a target for gossip. He was adored by women and resented by some men, and the tension between his public image and private reality became part of his legend. When he died suddenly in 1926 at just 31 years old, the mystery of his true self was left forever unresolved. Fans mourned a star, but they never really knew the man. Valentino's story is a reminder that even the most famous faces of early Hollywood were often hiding more than the camera ever revealed. The silent screen took his image, but his secret died with him. Cesar Romero is remembered today as the flamboyant Joker in the 1960s Batman series, but long before that, he was Hollywood's classic Latin lover. Suave, charming, and effortlessly elegant, Romero never married, a fact that fueled decades of speculation. He was often linked to glamorous actresses in the press, and those stories helped maintain a certain public image. But insiders whispered about his relationships with men, and the contrast between his public romances and private life became a quiet source of gossip. Romero never confirmed or denied the rumors. He chose instead to keep his personal life private while maintaining steady work in film and television. His career spanned decades, and his professionalism never seemed to waver. Whether dancing, acting, or playing a villain, he brought charisma and discipline to everything he did. When he died in 1994, Romero left behind a legacy of elegance, charm, and enduring mystery. He had succeeded in an industry that punished disclosure, but he did so by refusing to let the public see everything. That silence was not weakness. It was survival, carefully maintained over a lifetime. Cesar Romero understood that the best way to keep a secret was to never appear to have one. Tony Randall was adored as Felix Unger in The Odd Couple, a role that showcased his wit, precision, and sophisticated charm. But throughout his career, rumors about his sexuality persisted. Randall's refined mannerisms and culture persona fueled speculation, even though he was married for many years to Florence Gibbs and later, surprisingly, to Heather Harlan, who was 50 years his junior. He never addressed the rumors publicly, choosing instead to focus on his craft. That decision allowed Randall to remain a beloved presence on stage and screen without becoming defined by gossip. He worked steadily, earned respect, and built a reputation as one of the most reliable comedic actors of his generation. By his death in 2004, the whispers had largely faded, replaced by appreciation for his talent and longevity. Randall's story shows how persistent rumors could follow even a happily married performer for decades. In Hollywood, certain styles or mannerisms were enough to keep speculation alive, regardless of the facts. But Randall refused to give the gossip power, and in the end, the work outlasted the whispers. His greatest triumph was not just making people laugh, it was making them remember the performance, not the rumor. Roddy McDowall began as a child star in How Green Was My Valley and later became iconic in Planet of the Apes, enjoying one of Hollywood's longest and most versatile careers. He was known for his professionalism, kindness, and an extraordinary ability to form lasting friendships with many of the industry's biggest names. But through it all, McDowall never publicly addressed his sexuality, though it was widely considered an open secret in Hollywood. He never married, preferring to keep his private life discreet. His friends and colleagues respected that choice, and McDowall seemed to understand something important about the industry, that visibility and vulnerability often went hand in hand. By refusing to discuss his personal life, he protected both his career and his peace of mind. When he died of cancer in 1998, McDowall was remembered for his artistry and his quiet dignity. He had navigated decades of Hollywood change without ever becoming a tabloid target, a remarkable feat for someone who worked so consistently in the public eye. His story is one of careful boundaries, maintained over a lifetime. Roddy McDowall proved that it was possible to be famous and still keep the most important parts of yourself private. Sir John Gielgud was one of the greatest actors Britain ever produced, a towering figure in theater whose voice and presence commanded respect. Within theatrical circles, his sexuality was an open secret, but the broader public knew little about his private life. That changed abruptly in 1953, when Gielgud was arrested in London for immoral purposes, a charge frequently used against gay men at the time. For any performer, such an arrest could have meant professional ruin. The scandal was exactly the kind of story that destroyed careers in an era of strict moral policing. But Gielgud returned to the stage with remarkable resilience, and his reputation survived the headlines. Audiences still came, critics still praised him, and colleagues quietly admired the dignity with which he handled the ordeal. He never publicly discussed his orientation, preferring to let his work speak for itself. By his death in 2000, Gielgud's status as a theatrical legend was secure. What could have been a career-ending humiliation became instead a testament to his extraordinary staying power. The fact that he survived it all says something important about talent, timing, and the stubborn loyalty of the theater world. Gielgud did not allow one terrible chapter to erase a lifetime of brilliance. Charles Gray is remembered for commanding performances as Blofeld in the James Bond films and as the witty criminologist in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. His screen presence was polished, slightly sinister, and completely memorable. Off-screen, however, Gray lived quietly and kept his personal life shielded from public view. He never addressed his sexuality, but within the industry, it was widely assumed he was gay. Unlike some of his contemporaries, Gray avoided scandal entirely. He was reserved, private, and focused on a career that spanned both stage and screen. There were no public arrests, no lawsuits, no sensational headlines, just a steady body of work and a personal life that remained off-limits. That level of privacy was rare, but Gray seemed to understand how to protect it. His story is a reminder that not every Hollywood secret ended in exposure. Some performers simply kept their lives so tightly guarded that the public never got past the surface. Gray played villains brilliantly, but his greatest performance may have been the art of disappearing into his work. He gave audiences unforgettable characters, yet left no trace of the man behind them. Paul Lynde became famous for his biting wit and flamboyant humor on Hollywood squares, where his timing and campy style made him a television favorite. Audiences loved the sharpness of his jokes, but the very qualities that made him funny also fueled whispers about his private life. Within Hollywood, it was widely known that Lynde was gay, though he never spoke of it publicly, fearing damage to his career. That fear came with a price. Off-screen, Lynde struggled with alcohol and the loneliness of living in secrecy. The man who made millions laugh was often isolated, caught between the public persona and a private truth he felt he could not reveal. The tension between those two lives took a visible toll, even as the punchlines kept coming. Lin died of a heart attack in 1982. He was remembered for his brilliant comedic timing, but also for the personal battles he carried in silence. His story is one of the saddest on this list because it shows how much pain could hide behind a smile, and how the entertainment industry often profited from that pain without offering any protection. Paul Lin made the world laugh, but the joke was often on him.